You're on. Let's see if I can get some.
I'll talk about my trip across the Atlantic, but you can read a lot better the description of it by a guy who wrote a diary.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Named Steve Sweat,
Uh-huh.
and he was terrified most of the way across. And whenever we started to have a blow, he would start shivering and shaking.
Down writing.
But he did keep notes. And we had every kind of weather. We started out with very little wind, and then as we got it going across the ocean, we ran into some really heavy weather. And at one point we had to heave to for 2 days, which was very uncomfortable.
That means just pointed to the wind?
Yeah, we just took down the mainsail and we had a storm jib and kept the boat headed into the waves.
So everybody got seasick?
Nobody got seasick. I'm going to come back.
All right.
We didn't make a record trip on the manner of means. We had, as I say, we were hove to for 2 days, and we just went backwards with a northeast gale, big seas, and we all had arguments as to how big the seas were, but I think they probably, conservatively, were about 20 feet.
20 feet, wow.
Yeah, maybe 15 to 20 feet. But there was enough so that when you'd be up on a crest, you'd be blowing very hard, and then down in the trough, it would be much less, and the sails would flap, and it was very uncomfortable.
So wait, let's go back a second. So what year was this that you
This was
did?
1987.
87, and whose idea was it?
Well, this is Bill Apthorpe's idea, a friend in college, and a guy had done a great deal of sailing and a lot of ocean racing. And I believe it was in 1982, he had this boat built. It was built by Concordia and designed by a friend of his, and I don't remember the guy's name. It was a really good boat. It was 38 feet long, and not terribly comfortable down below, but very capable boat, sailed well in any kind of wind, and it was a good sea boat. And
How did you get included?
well, it's a funny thing. We went to a birthday party of a mutual friend, and he told me, he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sail across the Atlantic this was in the fall, next summer. And I said, oh boy, that's something I've always wanted to do. And that was the end of the conversation, really. He said, we're leaving from North Shan, and we're going over to Oban, Scotland. And about a week later, I got a letter from him, and he said, would you like to come? And I couldn't get to the telephone quick enough. One of his very good friends, who was a good navigator, had to give up right at the last moment, and so I was sort of a second choice, but an awfully lucky one for me, lucky break for me.
For navigator, you mean?
Well, I
did
the navigation,
yeah.
But he was supposed to do it, and Bill, the skipper, was a very good navigator, and he had his eye on everything that I did. But actually going across, we used Loran, which was the same as, a modification and not as accurate as GPS. But we used that most of the way, and we took sights whenever we could, the sextant, and we did that just to check ourselves and also to make sure if anything happened with Loran, we were able to proceed independently.
Did you know everybody?
I knew Bill and a guy named George Heller. A guy, Steve Sweat, I didn't know, and also a nephew of Elsie's, Roger Janeway. I had never met before, but All of them, all of those guys were good sailors. And,
Did you have meetings beforehand to see if
we
everybody
did.
got along?
we had meetings, but really not. It was committed to that crew.
Yeah.
The skipper made everybody get along.
Yeah. I guess we better come about. I think we probably had better stay
Close by today.
in the confines of the harbor. You got that ship. But we had a couple of really not near accidents or anything. There was never any danger that we ran into. The wind has shifted.
Coming back.
Yeah, want to let that go?
Yeah.
Not really making any steerage way. As I say, we had really stormy weather for a couple of days where we hove to, but we did have two incidents which were kind of unusual. And one was, I was on watch with another guy, and we were running before the wind, and there were big swells, and we were going up to the crest and then down into the troughs. And we went up in the crest and down into a trough, and about, it always gets closer as I tell the story, about 30 feet away, where there was the biggest whale that you could possibly imagine, that was parallel to the course that we were sailing, and he was headed into the wind, and we were running before it. And as we went by, his eye just followed us right by, and as we got a little bit down to leeward of him, he spouted. It's a really fishy smell.
It was a whale.
Yeah, it was a whale. It was a big one.
Wow.
And I can't tell you what kind it was. Probably, I don't know.
A gray whale or a humpback?
Well, maybe a right whale.
Yeah. And how close was it?
Oh, maybe 30 feet, 30, 40 feet.
Wow.
And I just didn't want to hit something like that because you know what happened to Moby Dick when he did. And then the other thing that happened, and it was the day after that, but pretty much the same conditions. We were running before the wind, and I was on watch again with the same guy. And it had blown from one direction for a couple of days, fairly steady breeze, and then it had shifted and blew at right angles to it, and it made a very confused sea. We came down one crest, and for some reason a wave hit us on one side and rolled us. Didn't by any close means capsize the boat, but it rolled the leeward side of the boat right down into the water, and we got a whole cockpit full of water.
Wow.
And we were sitting in water. It wasn't, as I say, it wasn't any real danger,
But it was scary.
but it was making it noticeable. I don't know how to come about. I don't want to get out too far and get doubtful here.
I have to tell where it's coming from.
I want to pull in your side, Glenn, and just get the bow around. Okay, now let it go. And trim it in.
So how long did this adventure take?
It took 22 and a half days to over. And as I say, we didn't have any really serious difficulties, except we did have one big inconvenience, and that was that the head busted about 10 days out.
Oh, jeez.
And we had to use a salad bowl stuck in the head passed down through the cabin and dumped overboard.
That doesn't sound pleasant.
No, it was inconvenient and not very pleasant. But other than that, we really didn't have any serious mishaps, failure in the equipment in the boat.
Did you see many other boats out there?
We didn't see any sailboats. When we crossed the Grand Banks, we saw some fishing boats. And we saw a couple of tankers off in the distance, way off in the distance. But other than that, there wasn't anything. Then, after that trip, Liz flew over with the wife, one of the wives of the other guy, Laura Heller, whose husband George was one of the crew. And we sailed in the Hebrides, the Outer Hebrides, and that was really good fun.
Oh yeah?
And we went into a different harbor every night, and it was a very interesting trip.
You weren't anxious just to get off the boat at that point?
Well, we had a couple of days ashore and got all washed up and everything like that, and clean clothes. So we were ready to go, and every night we put down an anchor and had a good meal. But we've sailed for, I'd say about, I forgot the exact number of days, probably six days in the Hebrides.
And this was the same boat?
The same boat, and there were 6 of us.
And how did the boat get back to the U.S.?
Well, that was a sad thing. I was all set to come back, sail it back. And, Bill wanted to get it back. He left it over there a year, and he cruised around the Baltic and the Norway and Sweden. And then he wanted to get it back so that he could race it back in this country, and he shipped it back on a freighter. So we were gypped out of a trip back.
Huh. Now, at the time, did you think this was going to be the first of a few of these kinds of trips for you, or did you think it was a once-in-a-lifetime?
Oh, I think once in a lifetime. I mean, I don't have many friends that do that every day. And he was a great guy, very generous in asking his friends to do trips of this sort with him. I've raced with him on a lot of other offshore races, overnight races, one Bermuda race, and he's just been a very generous friend.
What did it feel like when you arrived, that moment when you just sailed right into the harbor? That must have been something spectacular.
Yeah, it was, and I think our wives were glad to see us too.
I'll bet.
We didn't have any ship-to-shore conversations with them, and they didn't know that we were coming, and they had no way to know where we were or anything like that. Very different from what Abby Sunderland was.
Yeah. Couldn't track you with GPS every step of the way.
No, every step of the way. But it was a great trip.
So what is the high of sailing for you? What's the thrill of it? It's a lifetime love. What is it about it? Can you define it?
Well, I think it's just being close to the water. And people say, well, gee, it must be boring to sail 23 days and just see the same people and the same thing, but every day was a little bit different, and there was always something that needed fixing. I'm going to come about again. And I think it's just I just love being on the water. Look at that ugly thing down there. Honest to goodness, look at that.
You started sailing as a child, right?
Well, my grandmother had a house down in Pocasset on Buzzards Bay, and ever since I was born, my mother would go down there and spend a month or 6 weeks with her mother, and my my dad would come down on the weekends on the train. And there was a little 12-foot Paraschoff boat, that gaff rig boat, that was chartered every year by my grandmother. And I was allowed eventually to sail it alone by myself. And that's where I started to sail. I also had a rowboat that I was able to use every day down at the harbor. And so I'd get up early in the morning and put on my life preserver and go down to the harbor and go out in the rowboat. That was the main attraction until I was about 10 or 11. And then I was able to go out sailing in this little Paraschoff 12. And then in 1938, my mother and dad had a boat built, a wooden boat built at Pearson Kilburn in Fairhaven, right opposite New Bedford. And that was designed and built, designed by Concordia Company and built by Pearson Kilburn. And it was a nice little boat. My father was a real purist. He didn't want an engine in it, so we sailed for as long as we had the boat. And when there was wind, we went. When there wasn't, and there were many times when we were told to boat into a harbor in the afternoon when the wind died, and most people would go in under power, but we went in on the
dinghy.
The dinghy. We had a dory.
How big a boat was that? So had a cabin?
Oh yeah, it was a 29-foot boat, and it slept. Well, it slept 3 comfortably, but we slept many more on occasions.
What happened to that boat? Did you ever take that over?
Well, we kept it until after Liz and I were married. We used it for, I think, until 1954, and then we had enough kids, and it was such a small boat that we weren't able to take everyone at one time. So we sold it to a friend, and he put a motor in it, which was a sad thing to see happen, but it was a very practical thing to do. It made the boat much more usable. And after that, we chartered boats.
Never thought about buying another one?
No, not really, because we only used it for, we only would use a boat for about 3 or 4 weeks. We'd come up here, Harbor Island, and we had various friends who would ask us out to either the mountains or the seashore, so it was really almost better to have a boat charter. You didn't have to worry about hurricanes or maintenance or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to come about again. And we had some wonderful trips with all of the kids. And we had a bunch of boats. We had one boat that we liked very much. We used to pick up right here in Northeast Harbor that was built by Hickory. And we had that, I think, we chartered it for 5 summers in a row. It almost felt as if it was our own boat because we used it enough so that we knew all of the good features and bad features of it.
Uh-huh.
And it was a nice little boat. And then we chartered some boats down in Buzzards Bay and Vineyard Sound. Had a lovely old yawl. One of the trips that we had, chartered boats that we had up in Northeast Harbor, actually, we had, I think it was only a 35-foot boat, and I think we had 7 kids aboard, or 7 of us aboard. And
really?
We were sleeping on the floor of the cabin and all sorts of ways. And we came to Harbor Island, and Janie and Les were here. and we spent a couple of days just sailing around here with the people who were at Harbor Island. That was pretty good fun. But really, the thing that I liked about what we did is we didn't dedicate all of our summers to sailing. We did a lot of other things as well. And by not having a boat that you owned and felt that you had to use it every weekend,
Right.
you use it intensely for 10 days or 2 weeks or something like that. And we'd go off and do other things.
So you'd get your sailing fix. You weren't feeling like you were missing it.
No, no. We used to come here every year to Harbor Island, and always had a boat of one sort or another. This boat from 1962 on. So we had a little bit of sailing here.
This boat is from '62.
This boat was bought in 1962. It was bought the year that Sam Putnam married his wife Betsy, and it was bought for them to have up here on their honeymoon.
Oh.
And so this boat is one of the very first of its kind that Cape Cod Shipbuilding built, of this fiberglass model. I don't want to snag a board. You must have had some real chop here, Philip, if this is what you came through.
Well, we came through the other point, coming out of toothache that we did.
You had a little bit of rough.
Yeah.
Did you have your spray shields?
We had to get out and put them on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we knew it was sort of coming, and
Yeah.
that's the most scary experience we've had, is being caught out without spray skirts.
I'm going to come about again. Don't pull the jib
Okay.
across until we get around.